What is up? So in this video, I'm going to talk about why I hate course sellers. Now, there are a lot of people out there in the ecom space who, in my opinion, are grifters. Now, a grifter, or in some cases, people call them a course seller, is somebody who takes advantage of people, right? Now, just to be clear here, there are a lot of course sellers out there who sell a course that actually provides value. This is not what I'm talking about here. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to break down why I hate these people and how to spot them, right? So there are certain telltale signs that somebody is a course seller, right? So number one is, in my opinion, they have a big ego. So a lot of times what you will see is these people have a massive, massive ego. Now, how do you spot people with a big ego? Usually they come off as very narcissistic. They are very full of themselves. They have to be the center of attention. Everything they do has to benefit them, right? And so their focus and their mindset inside their business is on what benefits them, what feeds their ego. How can they make money, take money from other people in an unethical way, not providing them any real value in many cases, where maybe they're selling them a $10,000 program or a $5,000 course on something they've never even done, right? And so they are trying to feed their ego, right? And they're very good at convincing people, because they know that when they convince people to do things and when they convince people to buy their course, that feeds into their ego because they get more money, right? And so their ego, how do they feed their ego? With money, right? And so they feed their ego with making more money, buying new cars, buying new expensive watches, expensive houses, right? And not to say there's anything wrong with wanting any of these things. You absolutely can want some of those things, right? If that's what you want to do with your money, by all means, go for it, right? But that's not the reason they're buying these things. They're not buying these things just because they like these things. They're buying these things for the ego aspect, because they want to feed their ego. And when they buy these things, it helps to feed their ego. So they feed their ego with money. They feed their ego with expensive things. And now, why do these people typically struggle in business long term? What you will often see is, number two, they are good at sales, right? Now, this is a valuable skill set. They're good at sales and they're good behind a camera. So those two things can be very valuable skill sets. If you are good behind a camera, you're good at talking to people and articulating your points. I mean, heck, I'm not the greatest at that, right? But if you are good at talking to people and articulating your points, that can be a very valuable skill set if you're good at getting attention, right? Now, these people, they have big egos a lot of times. The grifters do. I'm not saying everybody who's good at content has a big ego and is a grifter. That's not what I'm saying at all, right? But the people who do, a lot of times, they are good behind a camera. They have a big ego, and they're often good at sales because they're good at talking to people. They're good at communicating. However, what they are usually not good at is running a business. They usually don't understand business. So they understand content. They understand how to communicate to people. They understand how to even deceive people into doing things that they want, or trick people into buying something that doesn't provide them any value. They understand how to make themselves appear a certain way. They're very convincing, because they're good at sales, just like a used car salesman. Used car salesmen are oftentimes good at selling things. They're good at selling people things that they don't really need, right? And so these people, it's the same way. They're great at sales. They can get you to buy something that you don't really need, and they're good at putting on a show and putting on a fake personality. Now, what you will find is oftentimes the grifters, they don't act the same way off the camera as when they're in front of the camera. They act completely differently if they're not in front of the camera, right? Where, for example, they may come off as a really nice person and this great person who's nice to everybody, but outside of the camera, they're treating their employees like crap. They're talking down to them. They're talking to them as if they are better than them. They blame other people for their problems. So maybe, for example, they're having a business problem because their business has some issues, like they're offering an info service, for example, some kind of info course or service, right? Where they're basically selling a course, but you can also maybe get some coaching, right? And so they're selling this thing, right? And they're not providing value equal to what they are making people pay, right? And so what happens over time? Their business may start to struggle because they don't understand business, and that's not their focus. That's not where they're prioritizing their time. Their priorities are on feeding their ego. Their priorities are on buying expensive cars and expensive watches or Lamborghinis, whatever it is. Their focus is not on growing their business. Their focus is not on doing the things necessary to grow a business, like hiring employees, right? Or investing into the business. That's not their focus. So what happens? They're good at sales, they got a big ego, and now what happens to these people? Third thing you'll see is they jump from thing to thing. So we'll put jump. They jump from business to business to business. Now, you'll notice this happening too. Have you seen the Ecom people where they are selling drop shipping, a drop shipping course? Go buy my drop shipping course and you can make millions overnight, right? And then 3 months later, what are they doing? Amazon FBA or TikTok Shop, or it may be crypto or some new business, right? And they're telling you how they're an expert. And if you want to be like them and you want to drive a Lamborghini like them and you want to be rich like them, you buy their course for $5,000. Now here's how their business model really works. They sell you an info course or some kind of coaching program where you're not really getting much access to them. You're not getting much that's actually special for a very high price. They mislead 5 people. Let's say they sell a $10,000 course. They mislead or deceive 5 people every month into buying that. How much money are they making? If they get 5 people to spend $10,000 on something that has no margin, there's no cost of goods to sell that. You sell a $70 product, your cost of goods, maybe it's 15, 20 bucks, and then you got to run ads to that. It's very expensive. It's a lot more challenging to do that. Right? It's a lot more difficult to do that at scale when you account for the payroll and you account for the ad costs and you account for the fulfillment and the shipping and the returns. That is more difficult. Right? It takes a high level of skill to do that at scale. But what they do, because they don't have that skill a lot of times, is they sell info. They sell $10,000 courses. Right? And so they sell a $10,000 course because they can make a lot of money doing it. They got to get 5 people to buy a course for $10,000 and they make $50,000. That's basically straight profit because they have little overhead. And so you'll see these people, big ego, this one especially, they come off as very convincing behind a camera. They're great at selling, they're great at talking to people, they are often very extroverted, right? But they struggle in business and they jump from thing to thing to thing because they don't understand the business side and that isn't their focus. Here's the thing. You cannot fake this. Like, you cannot fake having good intentions. You cannot fake it in business. You can only get away with it so much if you are faking that, right? And so to be successful in business, you have to act in a way as if you actually have good intentions, right? Or your product just has to be so good that people just don't care. Like, it has to be that good that they just keep buying it even if they hate you, right? There's examples of people like this online too. But in some cases, let's just say you're selling a product, right? And for you to be successful, the product has to be good, right? They have to have a reason to keep buying that product, right? If they don't, what's going to happen? So here's what happens. You get what's called negative word of mouth, right? Negative word of mouth. We'll just put negative for now. And here's what happens to your ad costs, right? And so let this be like a line graph here. And this is going to represent your CPA. Now, what's going to happen over time as you start to get that negative word of mouth? You've seen other people talk about this. If you've ever seen Alex Hormozy, he talks about this, I believe, in several of his videos. So what happens is over time, that cost per purchase is going to go up. And if you don't have returning customers, the audience that is seeing those ads, it's going to expand to colder and colder audiences, right? And so over time, there's things you can do to lower your CPA through creative testing, through conversion rate optimization. No matter what product you're selling, there's things you can do to try to lower your CPA. But realistically, as you spend more money, if you spend more money on ads, what's going to happen? Your CPA is typically going to go up in some fashion. Now, it might look something like this, right? If we erase this, and we say, hey, we're doing some creative testing, we're doing some CRO, various other things, right? It might look something like this, more like that, right? But it's typically going to go up. It's going to trend in the upward direction, right? It's not going to typically trend in the downward direction. So say, for example, you're over here, right? Right somewhere in here, and now you get a new landing page that's a winner, right? And so your CPA drops, and then you start to scale and it starts to go up again, right? Same kind of pattern there. So over time, as you spend more money, as you're spending more money, you're reaching typically colder and colder audiences, which cost more and more to convert, right? And so that's what typically happens. Now, and then over time, as you spend more money, you're going to reach colder and colder audiences because you're going to start to exhaust that audience. So the platform, if you're looking at, say, Meta, for example, or Facebook, they're going to typically show the ads to the people first who are most probable to convert, generally, right? So when you first launch a new creative test, right, it's going to start, something like this. Like, let's say, for example, these are the people who are really engaging right here with your ads. These are the people who are liking everything. They're visiting your website all the time. A lot of times, these are going to be the people who see the ads first, right? And then who's it going to go to? Typically, the people who it still thinks are fairly probable to convert. Something like this. And then over time, it looks a little interesting. And then over time, it's going to go to broader and broader audiences as you spend more and more money, right? And it's going to go broader and broader, and your cost per purchase, typically, it's not always the case, but typically it's going to trend upward. So what do you need to be able to be successful if your cost per purchase is going to just trend upward? You need a real business. And this is what the gurus do not understand because they don't understand business, right? Their focus is on buying expensive cars, not reinvesting into their business. Their focus is on expensive watches and feeding their ego, not investing into their business to grow their business, right? And so in order to grow the business, typically you have to be investing into the actual business, right? You have to be doing new product launches in some cases if you're doing like D2C, right? Or you have to be at least making your product better, right? In some way, shape, or form, thinking about how you can deliver a better product to the customers, right? And even in the info space, you have to make sure what you were selling them is worth the value, right? If you're selling some course that you made with ChatGPT for $10,000, it's like you're not going to retain customers. You're not going to build that positive word of mouth, and you're not going to build a real brand around providing people real results if you aren't focused on growing the business. And you also need to take accountability. If somebody is selling somebody a course for $10,000 online, and they are struggling to see success and they're getting lots of negative feedback. You're getting lots of negative feedback from people claiming they've been scammed, for a pretty large amount of money for a lot of people. That you need to fix that. You need to make it right. You need to do right by people because that's not how you win in business. You might win in the short term, right? These people who do this stuff, they may win in the short term, but they're going to lose in the long term. You won't hear about them for a long period of time because they're building a bad reputation for themselves. And one of the hardest things to get over is having a negative reputation. So with that being said, hopefully this helps you to be able to spot and hopefully avoid some of the course sellers out there, and to avoid losing your money, wasting your money on some course that's not going to help you. So anyways, with that being said, hopefully you found this helpful, and feel free to subscribe for more. Well, we're running out of room here, but you get the point. Feel free to subscribe for more and drop your brand name below if you are with a brand by chance, and maybe I can send you a free review of your brand.